back to my channel, and today I have a very exciting video for you. I've been waiting to film this for the longest time, and that is a book review of this book. A bit skeptical of like saying the title just because I don't know how YouTube feels about it, so I'm just going to refer to it as Married Annoyed. But yeah, this is a book written by Chris and Rosie Ramsey. They are a couple. They have a podcast of the same name, and they wrote this book that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. I pre-ordered it ages ago. Like, there were still signed copies available when I pre-ordered it, and I did manage to get one. And yeah, I read it all in one day, so I could film this video, but I will be rereading it. But I just thought I'd, review it because it's just, there's a lot to unpack here and I love it. So to just like start with some of like the basic facts, as I already said before, this book is written by Chris and Rosie Ramsey. They're a couple. They also have a podcast together which is kind of like what the book is kind of like based on, but kind of like leads on. It's like an extension of the podcast. I've been listening to their podcast for well over a year now. I started listening last year, April, May, around that time, and I've been listening ever since. And they said they were writing a book at the beginning of the year, and I was like, this cannot be real. So obviously, as an avid reader myself, I had to read it, and also as an avid reader, I had to review it because that's just what I like to do. This video will also be in my All Things Books playlist. You should definitely check that out. I think there's only like 2 other videos in there so far, but still watch them. They're very useful. Just a little bit more about the book. It is £17. Well, it's £16.99, but closer to £17. It's hardback. That sound, I love it. Anyone who enjoys reading will understand the joys of a hardback book. Yes, they're a little bit more expensive, but it's the experience I'm paying for, not just the words inside of the book. And if I can get a book in hardback, I will do it every single time. So, to just kind of sum up the like general vibe of the book and generally how I feel about it, I loved it. It's hilarious. They're hilarious anyways, and that didn't stop when it got to the book, which was great. The tone of the book is really like conversational and like colloquial, which was lovely because it made the book really easy to read, and was probably why I was able to finish it in less than a day. But like other than that, the fact that it's so easy to read means that it's like accessible. I don't believe that books and literature should be like really complicated and have like loads of long words and be exclusive to only those who can understand it. Reading is great, and I believe it should be accessible, and this book is definitely it definitely is that. Like, I think the average person could pick up this book and read it. Not sure if they have the stomach to handle all the stuff that's in this book, but at least they will have the ability to read it, and it's not keeping people out because of that. And not many books can achieve that kind of inclusive feel, so that's definitely something to be commended about this book. And I found myself like reading it and like nodding along, and it was like I felt like I was having a conversation with them even though I was just doing the reading. So moving on to the actual contents of the book itself, it's split into like 3/4 like main overarching chapters. In the first one, they talk about their lives like before they met and what they were like when they were younger, which is very interesting to read. They're very open about a lot of stuff, which is honestly great because I'm not that open about loads of things, so I'm glad that there are people in this world that are comfortable being so open with anyone who has access to books. But yeah, in the first chapter they just talk about what their lives were like, and in the podcast like they give like stories like here and there, but the book really allowed them to like elaborate on more things and actually talk about things in more detail, and that was just really lovely. In the second chapter, they talk more about their lives together, like as a couple, and what their lives have been like, and it was honestly like so funny. And I think the weirdest part for me was that like I am a 19-year-old uni student. I've never been married. I don't have any kids, and I don't plan on having any kids, and yet I was still relating to what they were saying, which is like really weird. It was more of this kind of thing where it's like, oh okay, I don't really want to do any of that stuff. Good for you. I enjoy reading about your experiences. I wouldn't like this for me, but like good for you kind of thing, right? Like obviously not in like a bad way, but I love reading about like people's like experiences and stuff and like how they feel about it, and it's quite like endearing to read. And they, as I said before, they're really open about a lot of stuff as well. So the third like main like overarching chapter is where they talk about like more of like their issues with each other and like issues that they've faced. And this isn't unusual for them. If you listen to the podcast, you know, but like they have a segment called What to Beef, in which they every week they like air out an issue that they have with each other, and it's like hilarious. I personally think it's one of the best parts of the podcast. Um, but yeah, they do that in the book as well. Not in like a really mean, horrible like way, but it's like it's still like very humorous. They keep it quite like light-hearted, and they're still like open about a lot of things as well, which is quite like refreshing to see because especially with the rise of like social media, you get loads of people kind of portraying these like really perfect, like insta perfect lives, and in this book they're like, yeah, no, it's not like that. So that's really quite refreshing to see and to read even. I'm trying to like not give away like too many spoilers about the book because well I don't know if you like plan to read it, but if you don't, you definitely should plan to read it. It's a very good book. But like just a little bit about how the book is structured. So as I said before, they have like the three main like overarching chapters, and within that there's like kind of like sub chapters. There are like a few pages long each. They just kind of and each sub chapter focuses on like a different topic, so it's quite nice. So it's not like the entire book is just on one like singular thing. There's a bunch of different stuff that they touch on that I probably wouldn't even think to like ask about or to like even talk about. So I really like how they structured it, and it's not like half the book is just like the first half written by one of them and the second half written by one of them. It's like basically imagine a podcast but in book form. They're going like back and forth, like someone will probably write like a sentence or like a paragraph, and then the next one will like respond to that. And I'm just interested to know like how the writing process for that was. Like, did they have to go through in like the full order that they wanted to write the book in? I have a lot of questions because even though it's really easy to like read and it flows really well, it probably wasn't easy to write in that style because they basically had to wait for the other one to respond to what they'd written before they could actually continue with the book. But I just thought that was a really interesting structure. I personally have not read another book of that structure before, so it was really nice to read that, and it still was easy to read, it wasn't complicated. Also, another thing about the layout of it is that it's not like it has their name and then like a colon and then what they say. They just write in different fonts, so like one font for Rosie and another font for Chris. And in the introduction at the end of it, they kind of like show the two different fonts they're using, but I couldn't really see the difference between them. But then as you start reading the book more, it just becomes obvious like who is who. I'm trying to like not give away like too many spoilers of the book and what the actual content of it is, but it was just hilarious all the way throughout. Like usually when I'm listening to the podcast, I usually have to like pause it and like laugh, and I basically did the same thing with the book. Obviously you can't pause a book, but you can like place a book down for a little bit, laugh, and then pick it back up again and continue reading. And that's basically what I was doing. The one thing though that stuck with me all the way throughout reading the book was like in the introduction, where like, one of the first chapters, Rosie was talking about like how when she was younger they used to go for nights at like 7:30, and even now I'm still thinking that is so early. Like I could not imagine saying to my friends, yeah, 7:30, let's be at the place. Like no, that just doesn't happen nowadays, and I haven't stopped thinking about it. I would say that the only kind of like criticism I have about this book is that I feel like it ends quite abruptly, because there isn't really a kind of conclusion to it. Well, it's like one of the last like main chapters is them like talking about like who's gonna like die first, but like obviously there is a lot more to the chapter than that. but it's basically them talking about like them like writing like their wills and stuff, and have they thought about like who's gonna like die first and what happens. Sorry, that's probably like a massive spoiler, but and then after that there's like a kind of mini chapter where they basically put in a bunch of questions that they get from the public, but these are the questions that are focused on like all the Pooh stories that they get sent in. So if you've not listened to the podcast before, this might be a bit confusing, but in the podcast they have a segment where they just kind of read out like stories that they get sent from like the public, and specifically like Pooh stories for this bit because they get sent quite a lot of those, and they just have a chapter for them at the end. And reading those stories is a very different experience to hearing it, because with reading it you actually have to really take it in, like you can't just zone out, like you're reading that and it's like, and I did gag at every single story. So that aside, back to what I was actually saying, but then after that little mini chapter at the end, there isn't a kind of like conclusion for the book or any kind of like last words, and it did feel like it ended like quite abruptly, because usually with like most other books or most other like non-fiction books anyways, there could be like little small conclusions and like small words at the end, but I didn't really feel like there was any of that in this book. So it was just kind of like you had the last little chapter and then I turned the page and there were no more words there, and I was like, oh okay, guess that's the end of it then. I'm always sad to finish a book, but yeah, I would say that's kind of the only criticism I have. Other than that, there isn't really any way I could like fault it. However, I would say that overall I really enjoyed this book. As I mentioned earlier, I read it all in less than a day. I'm definitely going to be rereading it and read it at a slower pace, but I do highly recommend this book if you were looking for something that's really funny, really real, and like open and honest. I would also obviously recommend listening to their podcast because it is hilarious, and the episodes have been even longer recently, which is great for people like me who don't have a life. Also, this is probably fairly obvious, but I am in no way associated with or affiliated with Chris and Rosie Ramsey. They don't know I exist, and that is fine. But that's just a really long way of me saying that all opinions in this video are my own. Obviously I'm already like a fan of like them and their work, but you know, this book, it is a good book. I can appreciate a good book when I read one. Other than that, I think I've said pretty much all the things I can say without spoiling the book too much. But please in the comments feel free to comment what your favourite book is at the moment, or a book that you would recommend to people, because I'm always looking for new books to read. Don't forget to check out the other videos on my channel, and don't forget also to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I thoroughly enjoyed making it and I thoroughly enjoyed reading this book. And if you do read this book, please let me know. Other than that, have a good day and thank you for watching.